Hello, we're back for part 3. Sorry, I thought I had 5 more seconds. So I was going to finish my sentence and then stop. So I ended mid-sentence. That's okay. You should have heard the brilliance after this stopped. Man, I really said some amazing things. You should have been there. Anyways, so we were talking about applying knowledge from positive and negative encounters. Pay attention to both, okay? Also, engage in dual perspective and self-monitoring. Now, here's the deal. Dual perspective means I see my side and I am able to see what you're saying. I'm able to see your side. I'm able to take in your perspective. Okay, so this requires some maturity for you to engage in dual perspective, especially for the people that you are close to in your life. Do them the favor of engaging in dual perspective. You probably want people to do this for you. It doesn't mean that you're going to agree. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be peachy keen afterwards. But we're going to talk about listening this semester. Listen to them, engage in dual perspective, and do your best to try to see things from their perspective. And really take that in and really think about it. It makes the people in your life feel so accepted. And so even if you disagree with them, if they can really tell that you are engaging in dual perspective, most people, I can't say everybody, most people will respect that. Most people will respect that. And one of the reasons we have such a major, and there are 1,000 floppity jillion reasons we have this, but one of the reasons we have such a divided political climate in the United States is people refuse to take in dual perspective. People refuse to really think about things from the other possible perspectives, I find. Now, there are more people out there who are way more open-minded than you think. I find the more I talk to people, the more open-minded they actually seem. But that's when you actually engage them and not just think and totalize who they are by what they might think about their politics. And then self-monitoring. Self-monitoring is where you actually have a filter. And some people have, it's in their brain and out their mouth, and they're like, well, that happened. You know, self-monitoring is being able to monitor your communication before you send it out into the world. Should I say this? Should I say this in this way? Should I say this to this person in this way? Is this the moment to say this to this person in this way? Because sometimes, yes, you should say it. Yes, you should say it in this way. Now is not the time. Sometimes, no, you should not say it like this, even though now is the time, you know. And so these are the complexities of communication competence. But being able to even pump the brakes and self-monitor even a little bit is extremely helpful in increasing the positivity of the outcomes of your communication. Okay, so self-monitoring, by the way, takes practice. There is no pill you can take to self-monitor. There is no, oh, now I know about self-monitoring, I can totally do it. No, self-monitoring takes practice, okay? Now, if you are like me, I'm actually on the other end of self-monitoring. I am on the, I monitor everything out and say nothing. You're like, really? With all these screencasts? Oh yeah, teaching is different. So my self-monitoring needs to be in the other direction. I don't need to pump the brakes. I need to hit the gas. Okay, self-monitoring can sometimes be you're saying nothing. You're detaching yourself. You're withholding emotional and communicative content from the relationship. What's going on with that, and what can you do to say more? So self-monitoring is usually on the should I say this thing, but the other end of it is why aren't I saying it? Why am I monitoring so much? Makes sense. So dual perspective and self-monitoring, and by the way, dual perspective, that's hilarious. Dual perspective and self-monitoring, these are going to be really on that ethical end, where you're treating someone fairly, you're seeing things from their perspective, you're treating them as a thou, which is what we talked about with Martin Buber, okay? Demonstrating increased cognitive complexity and schema. Cognitive complexity just means being able to think deeply about what's going on and being able to approach something in different ways. So the cognitive complexity is linked with dual perspective and self-monitoring. Okay? And then preventing or managing incompetence when it occurs, because here's the deal. You're gonna screw up. You are gonna do incompetent communication. We all do it. The people who study communication do it. In fact, strangely, some of the people who study communication are some of the worst. And that's one of the reasons why they dedicated their lives to studying it, is because they were just epically in need of assistance and found that studying it helped them. Okay? So when incompetence happens, and we're going to talk about repair this semester, you got to learn how to repair. You have to learn how to let things go for yourself. You have to learn how to move forward and make good decisions. So all of these are things competent communicators do differently than the status quo. Okay? If you know someone that you would regard as a good communicator, they probably do these things. All right? So then, this being finished, this is so far this week we've talked about defining interpersonal communication, and we've done a lot there. We've now done communication competence. So now we have to ask our next question. Our next question is, how do we assess these three things? How do you know you've been appropriate? How do you know you've been effective? How do you what is the measure against which you are going to take your communication and go, okay, you know, is it some random idea in your head that you're just going to kind of hold it up against? Is it actually something objective that you can measure and put on a scale? What is it? Well, I mean, there's a lot here, but essentially the ways that we assess the effectiveness, appropriateness, and ethicalness, level of ethics of our interpersonal communication is we do it on the individual level first. Okay? So this is why the doing of it on the individual level first is why something that I deem to be effective and appropriate might not be that for someone else. And so what we definitely don't want to do is set one standard. But here's the deal. You as a human being, you're born and you're human, and let's just pretend all that's true, because it is. You're born and you're a human being and you live your life. And one of the interesting things about human beings is we are just like data gathering organisms. Like from the beginning, the light's hitting us, the sound is hitting us, the feels are hitting us, the smells are hitting the feels. Good Lord, that's another anyway. Our senses, okay, are continually bringing in data. And over the course of our lives, then, we start to interact. And while we are interacting, we are gathering data about ourselves, about others, about what it means to be in the world. It's how you know to be in the culture that you're in, is because you've gathered the data and you've processed it and you've come out with oh, this is how I'm supposed to do this, okay? You are given data that you crunch. And what happens is over the course of time, and so remember, the question is, how do we actually assess? What standard are we holding our communication to compare it with, okay? Well, over the course of your life, you gather this data, you interact with people, and without realizing it, you write implicit personal theories of communication. You take all of the information that you're given with like I say, interaction, communication with yourself, communication with the world, things you see on TV, even if you're not interacting, all things you see on social media now, because people are growing up with social media. So you write theories of communication. You just don't realize it, and they're implicit because you're not thinking about it. It is unconscious. All right. When you do this, you write these theories. So what is the definition of an IPT? This is IPTs, by the way, okay? Our unconscious, taken for granted assumptions about communication and relationships. So you, over the course of your life, have written implicit personal theories. And these dictate a lot in regard to your communication. I know that's vague. I'm going to tell you on the next slide, okay, what they tell us. But here's the deal. You pull these from your life, and you write these theories, and then they tell you things, okay? So, folks, you are a theorist. You just might not be one in an official capacity, okay? So here's what they tell us. IPTs tell us with whom we should communicate. If I were to ask you, how do you know who you should communicate with, you would have a hard time answering it at first, but then the more you thought about it, the more you'd be able to tell me. You'd be able to say, well, you know, I guess it depends on the context, but I look for these things. If someone looks like they're scary, I'm going to stay away. If I'm at class, I look for someone who looks like they're in charge, like a professor. Or if I'm at school, I look for someone with a name tag. I mean, there are all sorts of different ways that we decide with whom we should communicate. When we should communicate with others, what we should communicate. And so here's the deal. Over the course of your life, you have gathered data that tells you this. You watched the people you grew up around do this, and you sort of took that information and wrote a theory on with whom, when, and what we should communicate. So this can be how, by the way, the what we should communicate, think about this. Were you given the same data at home growing up as your romantic partner? Were you given the same data as your boss on what it means to work at this place? You know, what we should communicate is not going to be the same everywhere. And so oftentimes what you're going to see when you see differing communication, either styles or expectations or whatever, is people had different data. And they wrote different theories. And just in my experience, I'm not sure what yours is, but how often do you write the same theory? Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's different, which is a vague statement. I realize that, but it's the truth. They tell us how we should communicate with others, how we should present ourselves, what effective communication is, and how to interpret others' communication behavior. So sometimes these are really weird, and so here's an example of an IPT, okay? One of the IPTs that I wrote growing up was, to express anger, you yelled, okay? I wrote that theory. You yell, you raise your voice. That's how you express anger. So, now no one sat me down and said, okay, Brandon, here is how you are going to express anger. No, it's a theory I wrote. How to communicate, what to communicate, how I should communicate with others if I'm angry or in conflict. There you go. How do I present myself when I'm in there? What is effective there? You know, that's what I wrote that, okay? Well, I grow up and I start to study communication, and while I'm studying communication, I meet my spouse who doesn't yell, okay? And by the way, it turns out yelling is really bad. The research around it is pretty conclusive. Don't yell. Sometimes you have to raise your voice, but yelling is bad, okay? So I had to rewrite my IPT, and it was really hard. And I still, after all these years, want to yell, okay? But I don't. No matter how mad I get. My voice will start to raise, and I'll catch it, and I'll pull it down. So, folks, the how we should communicate, how we present ourselves, what effective is, and how to interpret others' communication behavior. Because do you know someone? You probably do. You probably know someone who's written a theory around effective communication that goes a little bit like this. Well, I've expressed my opinion, and I've said my piece, and that's how I am, and so that's effective. And right now, I'm going to tell you, that's how I am is a cop-out. And there is a level of figuring out who and how you are and accepting it and being that. There is. But when we use that as an excuse to beat people up with our communication, that is a cop-out. Okay? It's not effective, and it's not appropriate, and it's darn sure not ethical. Okay? So I'm going to pick up in part, what are we in? I think it'll be part 4, where we will finish IPTs. See you there.